The following program was made possible thanks to the generous support of our Kickstarter backers.
Well, first Holmes was born, then he got fat, bald, and tired.
Sup, Holmes?
Beware, your host, Jonathan Holmes.
Hey everybody, how are you? And we're here with Auston Montville, co-creator of Sportsball, a video game. Thank you so much for being on the show, Auston. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for letting us be here. This is super cool.
Anytime. It was tough. I wanted to get the timing just right, and unfortunately, things didn't work out in terms of getting it on right around Sportsball. But this could be the perfect time, I'm hoping, because new Wii U owners are out there. People are turning on their Wii U's for the first time, sometimes in a little while, because Smash Brothers just came out. And to me, Sportsball is a perfect game for Smash Brothers fans who, how many hours can you play of Smash Brothers? Maybe 6, maybe 7, maybe 8. But eventually,
There's still more hours in the day.
Exactly. But eventually, you're going to want to spend one of those hours doing something that engages with your friends in a way that Smash Brothers does, but does things that Smash Brothers has yet to do. And that's, to me, what Sportsball, which is like one of the Sports Friends titles in a lot of ways. To me, it's like the unofficial Sports Friend on another console game. Sportsball, how did you come up with a concept for this thing?
It's actually closely related to that. So Sportsball is a combination of soccer, jousting, and flying birds. So yeah, it's this crazy local multiplayer game. You're mounting up on these giant birds, and you're lancing each other and tackling and whatnot. Where this actually came from was inspired by Sports Friends. So rewind back a couple years ago, before anyone knew about Sports Friends, they were doing this Kickstarter. And I was really into it. I was like, this is awesome. Like, I knew about Joust. I'd played that before, Johann Sebastian Joust. And I was really excited about that. And they had this design goal, which I found really interesting, which was, they were questioning how would they make a game as much fun to watch as it is to play? And so because of that, I was like, well, what sort of game would I design? And I was just, before work, I was just doing like my morning exercises, and I was thinking about it. And somewhere along the line, the game Joust popped in my head, because it's one of my favorite games of all time. That's that classic 19-something, 30-year-old game. And I was like, man, that's a cool game, but what if it had teams? And when I started thinking about that, like, everything sort of fell into place. It's like, okay, so now it's all multiplayer. People are playing against each other, and like there's a focus on the ball, and like, where does the ball come from? Well, like the eggs, when you hit someone in Joust, the egg appears. And like, what if you had to score that? And like, I got really excited about it. So what happened was, after work that day, I got home as quickly as I could, and I started prototyping the game. I made the simple Joust mechanics in a few hours, and then I went to sleep. And then a couple days later, I had a little bit more time, and I finished up the basic mechanics. So I had birds flying around that felt like Joust. When you tackle someone, it would create a ball, and you could kick that ball in the net and score points. And I just so happened to have a few friends over that night, so I handed out 4 controllers. And I had worked a total about 9 hours on that prototype, and they played that for an hour and a half straight, just that raw prototype, which is a pretty good ratio for dev time to play time. So I got really excited in this concept, and then we went on and did a whole bunch of other things and started a company. Yeah.
Sure. Wow. So it was Sports Friends, and then this inspiration that just, it seemed like it came to you, a combination of memory and this excitement about creating a game where friends can get together and continue to experience the same mechanics in new ways over and over again. Were other games in part influential to you? Or there other games that allow for that you used to play that had an effect on you?
At the time, I wasn't really thinking about it, but over the course of the development of Sportsball, yeah. Obviously, like when Towerfall and Samurai Gun hit, and Nidhogg, those are like the big local multiplayer games now. I knew about Nidhogg beforehand, but it was still a very different game. Towerfall and Samurai Gun I hadn't even heard of at that point. But as those games came out, I was like, okay, this is really cool. Like, people are really looking for this sort of experience, and I would look at sort of what are the decisions that they made. Like, Towerfall's focus on like the variety of game options and modes, and focusing on just that core loop without even like for the original release, without even a campaign, that was a big influence. And towards about halfway through the development of Sportsball, I got really into the competitive Melee scene, Smash Brothers Melee, and so despite the game being like 12 years old and like Smash 4 coming out recently, Melee had a huge influence on it, and the community surrounding that. Because one of the things that I don't like that happens to games is that like everyone gets really excited about a game and it's really awesome and like years are spent developing it, right? And then it comes out and then 2 weeks later it's gone. It's just a blip, right? Like it's just a tiny little experience. Instead, there are a few games that last for a while, like whether they're amazing like hits like like Smash Brothers or something like that, or Halo that lasts for generations, or even the more obscure game like Phantasy Star Online, which just foster a core community and that lives with them for years. Like I want to make experiences like that, and the Melee scene has helped encourage me to make some decisions about Sportsball to hopefully make it a longer-lasting game.
Ah, interesting. Are there direct things about Melee that influenced the creation of Sportsball, that you saw that in Melee and thought, well, then I need to do this in Sportsball because of that?
It's a lot of the way the mechanics were accidentally built into the game. So a lot of the exciting things about Smash Brothers Melee is all the emergent gameplay that happened from the systems that were designed that were never intended. That's sort of what has enabled the game to exist for so long. And so I've tried to build that into Sportsball the best I can. We spent a lot of time balance testing the game, and the game mechanics enabled us to do things that I didn't originally plan. For example, one of the first advanced techniques you learn in the game is a technique called the pivot. This is when you're flying with your bird and you're carrying a ball in one direction, and then you press dive in the opposite direction to juke, which will actually flip your bird in the opposite direction and throw the ball in the opposite direction. So normally when you kick a ball, it's going to go in the direction you move in, so you have to follow it. You have to loop around the map. But when you learn to pivot, you can instantly change direction, and it just opens up a ton of opportunities for you. That's when we found that. I don't know if it's the exact same power or reveal as discovering wave dashing, but it's something that really opened up the game. And so as the game continued, we have discovered a few more techniques that I didn't intentionally put into the game that we've embraced. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, as people get better than we are at the game, they're going to discover even more things that weren't intended. And just learning how to embrace those concepts. Because I think that's what's going to make a game really valuable over a great long period of time. We'll keep discovering new things. Like the tier list will keep changing because new techniques, new styles of play, and new skill arise in the scene.
Yeah, it's something that it's amazing that you try to harness that like accidental design, but allowing for accidents to then be embraced by the players to make them feel like they are more a part of not only the experience of playing it, but a little bit like designing it. Like if you decide I'm going to use this design element to this end, you're a little bit, in my mind anyway, the way I feel when I'm figuring out something that I'm not sure if it was intended. I feel like I'm sort of a part of the design process because I'm deciding how I'm going to use these mechanics to play, which is what a designer would do. It's that idea of really being a part of the game and having it be an extension of you that I think causes this longevity to happen. Like Halo, people talk to a diehard Halo fan, they feel like truly a part of the experience of playing Halo, not necessarily the lore and all that. And Melee fans are incredibly passionate to the point sometimes of vindictiveness. I've even had a few Melee fans get quite upset with me about my Smash Brothers opinions, but that speaks to their passion. And if I were to have created a game that would make people so passionate that they would get angry at me, then geez, you did something pretty interesting. Yeah, you did something worthwhile at that point. Have you had any angry Smash sports? I'm doing so many words. Sportsball fans come at you and say this game is so good, but it should have been this and that, and want to get in that armchair or backseat designer chair and really tell you what to do. Has that happened yet?
That has happened to certain degrees. It's happened a little bit with fans, and we'll see this a lot because we do a ton of events. We like to show off Sportsball and get a bunch of people in public to play it. So like at IndieCade or like Full Indie in Vancouver, we'll get people around, and that'll happen to a certain degree. But these players are new and they're still experiencing it, so you have to take that a little bit with a grain of salt because they'll be like, oh, like, Gigantoraptor is OP because all these players are winning with Gigantoraptor, but it's because Gigantoraptor is one of the easier birds to get into the game with, right? So there's a little bit there, but during the course of development of Sportsball, absolutely. And it's because of those things that made the game way better. So here's one example. the traditional way that we built Sportsball was the game mode Sportsball Basic. It's the first game mode that you're introduced to when you start up the game. And this is how I want players to sort of engage with the game initially, so that's why I set it as the default. In Sportsball Basic, it's a timed 2-minute match, and every time you tackle a bird, 2 balls will spawn, and there's a maximum of 20 balls on the field. So this very quickly becomes chaotic. There's balls all over the place, like people are attacking each other, it's just crazy. The reason why we want this to be the initial game state is because it's very easy to accidentally score balls. Just by sweeping up on the bottom, there's so many balls, generally one of them will get in the net because you have many more opportunities. Ball control is sort of a difficult thing. At the time, though, during development, that was basically the only way I played. I would always set it to maximum 20 balls. And after playing it at this one party, one of my friends was like, hey, I really think that you should limit it to 3 balls, like have only 3 balls in the field. He's like, I think that's going to make the game a lot more like technical. And I was thinking about that in my head. I'm like, no, this is awful. Like, it's so hard for people to score balls at all. Like, that would be the worst thing ever. Like, no, it's going to make people hate the game because they're not going to be able to play it. But I never, like, if someone gives me a suggestion, especially something that I do disagree with so much, I have to try it out just to prove them wrong. It's not good enough for me to just believe it because, you know, what if I am wrong? So I was like, fine, I'll show you how bad it is. And so I code it in the game, and we play it, and that's the way we play the game now. That became Sportsball Pro. That's like, that is, as soon as you learn how to play the game, that's it. And like, when I play the game, I pretty much only play Sportsball Pro. So yeah, like, he was a bit passionate about the game, and he had some ideas how to make it better, and because of that, it was far better than any idea I had. So there's been a couple examples of that. In fact, the core mechanic, one of the core mechanics of the game, diving, that wasn't in the original prototype. I thought it would be overpowered for players to be able to dive because they would be, since they're already above their opponent, they already have the advantage because they can win the tackle. If they can also dive, like, that just gives them an even greater advantage, right? But it actually increased a lot of versatility of the game. It made a lot more options. You could escape from opponents, which is really cool. And then when we incorporated different stats among the birds, then it just opened the game wide up. So yeah, that has already happened over the course of development with our playtesters or friends. And so I'm excited to see what happens when, you know, the fans start tearing into the game when they've spent, you know, dozens and dozens of hours on the game and really torn it up. And maybe we can, I would like to embrace those features as we continue to develop the game.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So for people who, they've probably picked it up as you've described it along the way, but in sports ball, you're trying to get a ball into a net, and depending on the arena, the net, well, maybe I'm blanking, but is it always in the center?
Generally, but there are maps that have it in different places. So the net's
Yeah.
never in the exact same place. But yeah, net placement and platform placement, the composition of level is very important in a match of sports ball.
Right. And so just killing your opponent isn't enough.
Oh, it's not killing. No, there's no death in sports ball because it's a sports game, right? Like, people don't die in sports.
Usually.
Tackling.
All right. You tackle the opponent by getting high ground on them, which is from or influenced by Joust and Balloon Fight, which is a Joust like made by Nintendo from years ago. So tackling the opponents gets you a ball, and then you need to then get the ball. So it's not just enough to tackle them, then you need to get the ball into the net. There's teams, the Gang Greens? Am I remembering that right?
Gang of Green.
Gang of Green. Yes, I came close. With different types of birds, different sizes, different speeds, different stats. So it's not quite to the same detail of learning a new character in a fighting game, but it's along those lines, where you're going to like the play style of different characters, and play styles are going to complement each other. Getting a big bird and a small bird team, one of you might run defense, and the other one tries to get the ball into the net, that sort of thing. A lot of, I think you use the term, emerging techniques are going to come from just letting yourself naturally explore the mechanics, as long as you keep an open mind about what you can do. If you try to do the exact same thing every time, you're going to find yourself feeling a little bit stuck. But if you're open to happy accidents, which it sounds like you were in the design process as well, a lot of really fun things can happen in that sports ball.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to see how people tear open the game and teach us things. Like, I can't wait for the day when I play against some fan and they just destroy me. Like, I am so excited for that.
And you, it's not published by Nintendo, but from what I gathered, it was actually Nintendo, Damon Baker, who told me about Sportsball for the first time. He sent me an email being like, "We're really behind these guys. We're really impressed with what they're doing, and they've helped you on the show circuit, on the convention circuit, quite a bit." What's it been like to work with Nintendo, and how did that relationship get started?
Well, it's kind of like a dream come true. Like I've been playing video games since before I remember, and like Nintendo was what I grew up on, right? Like I'm making a game for a Nintendo console. That's really freaking cool. Like this is a big deal for me. But working with Nintendo has been really awesome. I was at GDC. I volunteer there every year, so it's the Game Developers Conference. And I had a little bit of time between shifts, so I was wandering around the expo hall, and I saw a giant booth that was Nintendo and Unity. And I'm like, I work with Unity. I like Nintendo. Let's see what they have to offer. And they have this program for developers where if you're using Unity or if you're using HTML5, you can become a licensed developer fairly easily using one of their programs because they have tool sets to help you develop games if you're using that technology. So I got a card from the guy that was there, and he said, go to this website and fill out the form. And I've heard that those processes can take a long time, so I made sure to get the guy's card. So I signed up for the thing. I sent him an email maybe a week later and say hey, we signed up for this thing. What's sort of the turnaround time on it? I also contacted Dan Edelman because he was a representative for Nintendo at the time. Both of them said it should be going through the process. If you haven't heard from a week, contact us again. So I waited a week, didn't hear anything. I sent him another email. I got a call that night. And then we were a licensed Nintendo developer. So that's sort of how the process started. And it can take a little bit longer than that. Especially if you're a developer and you're signing up right now, it's the holidays. It's probably going to take a few weeks. But I hear 6 weeks at most for most people. It's going to depend on time. Either way, so that's how we initialized it. But at that point, our relationship was still okay, we're a developer and they're Nintendo. We had all the resources every time we needed to ask a question. The developer forums are really great. They would always respond. But we didn't have direct contact with them. And it wasn't until we went to an event called SIX, which is the Seattle's Indies Expo. That happened on the 4th day of PAX Prime. And originally, I wasn't going to go to this event. I heard about this event going on. It's okay, there's a couple of indie developers here, and it's going on during PAX. So I'm there are thousands of people going to this event for PAX. Why would they come 2 blocks away to this other event? Mm-hmm. Well, when I was talking with a friend who was sort of helping with the event user involved with it. It's actually Ty Taylor. He's the creator of The Bridge, and he's working on Tumblestone right now. Oh, sure. And so he was like, hey, I'm going to SIX. Are you? And I was like, I don't know. It's is anyone gonna come to that? And he's like, dude, press go there. That is the event for press go. It's this is the time once a year where every press outlet ever is in Seattle. He's like, SIX is a really good idea to go to. And I was like, okay, fine. If we can make use of that, we can contact some press people because we didn't have we're still an unknown developer, right? We don't have much of a press presence. So we're like, okay, we'll go to SIX. And so we set it up, and actually the response was way better than I expected. We had tons of people just wandering over from PAX. It was advertised pretty well, and that was awesome. But Nintendo showed up. A couple of representatives from Nintendo. One of them being Damon Baker was there, and so when we run our shows, we generally have one person running the game and teaching people how to play, getting a crowd assembled, and then we'll have another person on our team, Ned, go run off and talk with people. If there's someone from the press there, he'll answer some questions, or if there's some representative. And so he was talking with this guy from Nintendo that I had never met for the entire morning. It was we started off as soon as it launched up, I just started playing the game with people, and then he was off talking, and then 2 hours later, he's like, hey man, really good news. Nintendo apparently really likes our game. And our relationship has been great since then. We've been able to go talk with them at their offices. They've been in great contact with us. They were the reason why we got to go to Indiecade. They were the reason why we were in the EMP exhibit here in Seattle. And they are the reason why we're still front page on the eShop. They apparently it's sort of coincidence because I didn't think about this going in, but our game Sportsball is sort of for the target audience of Wii users, right? These are people who like to sit down and get a bunch of friends together to play Nintendo Land or Mario Kart or Smash Bros, right? And Sportsball is a game that just fits along that just fine, and it's a game that kids can play. I've seen a 78-year-old woman play Sportsball and have a blast. Anyone can sit down and play this game. So I think it conveniently applies to everyone who already owns a Wii U.
Yeah. It seems that Nintendo having gotten renewed momentum with the Wii U after Mario Kart 8, is really trying to capitalize on the idea that this is a local multiplayer console. Like you guys, and also Runbow, which I think is like a 9-player combat platformer or something.
Yeah, Rumbo, totally awesome.
All local multiplayer, along with like every other first-party game, has some sort of multiplayer component. So it is a perfect fit. Do you think that's the reason why Nintendo is formed this relationship where they're really advocating for you more so than they are other developers on there? I know some developers that are jealous of like, oh, how come the Sportsball gets all the attention? Where's my attention? But it's because from where I stand, it looks like, well, it's just such a good fit for what they're trying to show is the strength of this console. But do you think there was more to it than just that?
Absolutely. Like that's definitely a large part of it. I mean, like Sportsball is perfectly set for people who already have a bunch of Wiimotes and can sit around. Like it doesn't even require fancy controllers to play multiplayer. Like you can play with just a Wiimote. But like absolutely, like we are Wii U exclusive, and I guarantee that has an impact. Like save for a couple of like eShop specific titles, like by smaller developers, like I don't know any title that is Nintendo exclusive. Even Shovel Knight, it's also on the 3DS. It's also on Steam. So because we're going that, I'm pretty sure there's a bigger focus in Nintendo to support this game because their console is the only place you can play Sportsball. So that probably makes sense for them to support that.
Sure. And for you, did it make sense, or clearly it did make sense? What caused you to make that decision to go Wii U exclusive?
So one of the big aspects is that we had to cut online play. Online is probably one of the most complicated things that you can program for a video game, especially for a real-time game like Sportsball. Despite really wanting to do it, I've actually never programmed real-time online before, only like database online games that are like turn-based and really slow. And then all the research I've done into it was telling me, oh, it's going to take you like 3, 6, 8 months. Like that's our entire production cycle. Like we don't have the funds to do that. So we made the decision to cut online play. And so when I think about playing on a Nintendo console, when I get together with my friends to play on Nintendo consoles, like it's always happened local. Whereas other consoles like PC absolutely, but even PS4 and Xbox One, like people expect to have online experiences. So that sort of fit together with their vision, and that like okay, like since we can't do that, Wii U is going to be the best platform for us because people are a lot more inviting and welcoming to a game that you play locally.
Sure, and it speaks to the confidence you have in Nintendo and also in local online to say, yes, this is the direction we're going in firmly, and we're not going to kind of half do a little bit of this or put it in a couple of different places because we're not sure. It's a move that shows that you believe in what you're doing, and hopefully it'll pan out for you. I want it to.
Yeah, me too. We'll find out, right?
There is the thing about Sportsball, and when I recommend it to people, is they want single player too. This is what they keep telling me. And you were told me on Twitter a little bit that you're working on a single player, because they're a single player, but it's mostly practice, like ball control, which is important. But for me, when I play one-on-one Sportsball with somebody else, I can have fun until I start to feel guilty, basically, which is depending on my mood, because I tend to beat other people in it, and then they're just like, I just lose. I'm like, yeah, do you want me to, like, play with one hand for a little bit? So, but once you get 3 or more people in there, the same thing happens with Smash Brothers, like one-on-one Smash Brothers.
And that's the case of all fighting games, right?
Exactly. So unless you have a circuit you're running around with people where it's like, okay, I beat him and now I'll play winner and blah blah blah. When it's one-on-one, I just feel like a bad person after a while. But 3 or 4 people, like that's when your 2 hours or 3 hours of nonstop Sportsball come in. But I would love single player. Is it possible? Will it happen?
It is a thing. So actually, this is a thing that I've been dealing with recently because when you develop a game, you have so much time or so much money, and everything you add on to it is going to reduce the overall experience, I think. I'm very much about focusing on specific things. So, for example, targeting one platform allowed us to just focus on that. Like, we spent a lot of time doing the specific little details to get certified by Nintendo. If we had another platform, that would have just reduced the overall quality of the game, unless we had more time, which we didn't. Like, we have to live, we have to pay rent, so we only have so much time, as much as we stretched it as far as we could. So from the very beginning, Sportsball has been a multiplayer game. Like that's what you do. Like if you're going to play Sportsball, you're going to get together with other people. Like I put in Rally Ball. Like I actually kind of like Rally Ball. I think it's pretty exciting. It became a lot better than our initial vision of it. But it really is there as just a training mode. It's there to just satisfy you, to test out birds, test out strategies until you wait for your friends to come over. And so like, I've been playing games with my friends for a long time. Like that's pretty much the only way I play games now. And so my experience is like, okay, like yeah, if there's a game that you only play with friends, it's fine. Like Towerfall, I'm only going to play that with friends. Mario Party, I'm only going to play that with friends. Like there are single player options, but I would never be interested in doing that. So I was like, okay, like yeah, making a game that multiplayer only, that makes sense, right? It's like board games do that, right? Like I'm not going to play Dominion by myself. I'm not going to play Cards Against Humanity by myself. And then we release Sportsball, and we get told that no, that's not the case. Like it is expected for every video game to have a single player mode. And it's still something I feel a little odd about. Like I would like it to be more acceptable for games to be multiplayer only, for games to be single player only. Like you don't have to throw an online mode into every first person shooter, right? Like it can be just a single player experience. And by doing that, you're able to focus on the core experience. So that's what we did. We only had so much time. We focused on making 2v2 the absolute best experience it can be, which is why you can play that for hours. But yeah, at the end of the day, like people are buying this video game, and in the current market, people expect to have a single player. And so there's single player stuff I've wanted to do, and so now we're going to take the time to put some of that in. So like the single player mode we're working on right now, which is sort of like our easiest thing to get across, is going to be this sort of like training mode to ramp people up, but have goals and missions in it. So basically, like you'll go into an arena. There'll be maybe a couple of nets, a couple of balls, and maybe some dummy birds there. And you're going to have to try to score all the goals within a certain amount of time. The better you do, the better your rank's going to be. And so we're actually going to be able to create levels, which you get progress on, to create hours of content. And it'll be different. Like the experiences will be different for every bird. So hopefully that'll provide hours of content and also provide a smoother ramp into the gameplay experience. Because a lot of people, when they first start playing Sportsball, it's okay because it's a bit chaotic and you're learning with your friends, and so you go through an experience together. But if you're going to sit down by yourself and try to play Rally Ball, controlling the ball is actually kind of a difficult thing to do, especially depending on the bird you pick. It doesn't have a smooth ramp into the game. So we want to allow players who are just picking it up and want to try it out before they interact with anyone else a way to learn the game. So that's one of our ideas with single player, and it's the easiest thing for us to do. So that's why we want to try to get it done first, so we can get some single player content out now. And then hopefully, as the game develops and people play it more, we're going to get responses about what they would like to see in the game, and that's the stuff that we would like to follow.
Wow, that sounds like a lot of extra work, though. It's I mean, you've put the game out. It's done. It is a game. You can enjoy it. A lot of people have. It's for no additional cost. You're adding the single player mode and stuff. You're just patching it in there.
That's my goal. I know I don't know like if I can talk about details, but there are certain restrictions in how we can release updates to our game. So that's gonna play into it. But like, I don't know. I mean, like people are saying the single player mode is missing, and like our review scores are down because single player is not in. So that's telling us that like this game is not done. It's not complete. Like it's not fully featured. So then, like, if that's the way people think about the game, then well, let's give them the fully featured game. Like they already spent their $10 on it, and they expect to have this in. If it's not in, then we need to put it in. If it's additional content that they didn't expect, like if we decide to add new maps or like a new game mode or new power-ups or something like that, and that wasn't expected, well then yeah, maybe we'll charge for that, like do DLC packs. But yeah, the feedback we've been getting is that like this is missing from the game, not it would be cool if it also had. So let's fix the game. Like we have the technology to do that. So hopefully we can do that, but I can't confirm that it's just going to be a patch update. We have to find out what happens.
Sure. But that would be your goal. I have such incredibly mixed emotions about your life right now. Good grief. Because on one end, it's like, hey, I made the thing I wanted to make. If you don't like it, that's okay, but why are you saying something's missing? Because that's not something I intended to include. It's not my vision for the thing. On the other end, it's like, I want to make you happy. Sure, I'll make that thing you wanted. And also, like, I don't like getting bad reviews or less than reviews based on, and I've read some of the reviews, and you're exactly right. They say Sportsball is a lot of fun. Mechanics are really good. If you get 3 to 4 people, you'll play for hours, but no single player, so therefore Like they're judging it by
Mhm.
not what it is, but by what it is not, and how
The expectation of what a game is.
yeah, and I think that happened to Sports Friends quite a bit too, which I'm trying to recall what kind of single player modes. Of course, Johann Sebastian Joust is impossible to play single player, but
Yeah.
the other ones like Volleyball and whatnot.
When I checked out the Mac beta, like there isn't a single player option. Like you need someone sitting there. Like
Yeah, I thought
you
so.
can't play it. And I'm cool with that. Like if I'm gonna I can spend think about it, like $10-15, that's less than the price of a large pizza. That's less than the price for a IMAX movie ticket, right? And this is gonna provide hours of fun for a bunch of your friends. Like that's a freaking great deal. But there's expectations, right? Because other games will also be $10, and they will have the single player mode and the online mode and the local player mode. And so it's well, why didn't this developer also do that? And yeah, so there's a level of expectation, and so I feel we need to meet that, even though we have limited resources. But yeah, it's a weird thing. It's I wanted to build this experience, but hey, we did, and people are responding well to that. So I'm not complaining or anything. It's I just feel that oh man, people want this thing. The game could be better if we had it. So let's find out how to make that the best it can be. So then the game will be even more liked, right? People won't hesitantly recommend it, right?
Yeah, they want to like it, they do like it, but because of the standard they have instilled in their head, and maybe I have it instilled in there too, they think, well, it should have had this, that, and this. And it's almost a compliment that they like it enough to say, I want more of your game. And it sounds like you're excited to try to give that to them. I'm a real, I can play break the targets in Smash Brothers for hours. I'm mildly competitive, but competing against myself to try to learn the mechanics, and they're really smartly designed, I think, particularly in Melee. They teach you have to learn new mechanics in order to do all of Link's.
It's wall jumping, what?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, kind of a eureka moment for single player Smash Brothers for me was Link's break the target. So yeah, it sounds like that's where you're going with it. All 20 balls on screen is a lot like 4-player or 8-player Smash with items on and Smash Ball on and skill and randomness. 3 balls is for the glory, and now you're doing your break the targets.
Yeah, and another thing that we want to do is we want to show players that there is more depth to the game. For example, Towerfall did this really cool thing where you're going along and you're doing its training missions, and there's this one level where okay, you can beat it, you can hit all the targets, but it feels like the highest rank is impossible to do. You're I cannot physically move that fast. Once you play the game enough, or if you research online, whatever, you'll find out about the hyperjump. And the hyperjump allows you to skyrocket across the level incredibly fast. And that's how you have to get the higher scores. So I really want to do that with Sportsball. It's okay, if you're just playing the game, you'll be able to get if you put a little effort into it, you'll be able to get the lowest rank on all the levels, right? It's going to be tough on some of the last levels, but you'll be able to do it. But to get the silver or the gold or something like that, you're going to need to know how to do advanced mechanics. You're going to need to be able to dunk. You're going to be able to pivot, juke, box pivot, elevator, all the crazy techniques in the game. You're going to need to be able to do all that stuff. And hopefully that's where a lot of the community will start forming, because they'll be how do I get gold on the final level of Neo New Hampshire, right? I just can't figure it out. And people will be oh, have you tried this crazy bounce arc that you can do from the bottom diagonal area, because the whole map's connected and people don't always realize that. And yeah, so I really want to show that aspect of it.
Yeah. That's so exciting. To me, it's the scariest when I imagine what it's like to be a game developer. That is the scariest part to me. I don't want to spell it out, because then there's no mystery and there's no sense of accomplishment. There's no sense I put myself into this and got something back. I feel like things were handed to me. I'm just told, do this thing, and then I did it, and then I won. No, that kind of game design, no mystery, no excitement there. But at the same time, if you make things too hard to find or harder to find, people may never see them, and then so many of your ideas are left unheard. It's something, I don't know if you follow Clover Games into Platinum Games. They made Beautiful Joe and Okami, and now they're making Bayonetta and Wonderful 101 and stuff like that. Beautiful Joe to me was the pinnacle of slowly teaching you all the different mechanics and showing you that there's more and more depth, but feeling like you're learning it organically, like it's not being handed to you,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
you're discovering it constantly. But that series didn't end up doing so well for Clover, and then eventually Clover, unlike the first game, did great, and then and
Yeah.
since then, Platinum, like they either don't show you there's any depth at all, or they just hand you. I love Bayonetta and whatnot, but compared to Beautiful Joe, the teaching aspect of the game just isn't the same anymore. And I feel like it's because they got scared off, because when they taught really, really well, it didn't always get appreciated.
Yeah, so like it's definitely a balance. So we wanna enable multiple venues for that to happen, right? Like, so these are some of the things that we've done to sort of take care of that issue, I guess. Like the first thing is that Seattle Stadium is the default level that you play in. The reason is because there's a very natural way in which you progressively learn the mechanics of the game. For example, when players first start playing it, they're all running around, they're trying to score balls, and then eventually, if you've got a group of new players, one of them will figure out this great strategy, where if they run around on the map and they come from the right side and they fly up, just above that platform, they can just score tons of balls right to the net. And like that's like, oh my good lord, like that's like when players figure it out, they're like, I broke your game, I beat it. Like I know I'm the best sports ball player ever, no one can beat me. And then they play a couple more matches, and someone notices this, like, oh, that's how they're getting all the points. So they just put a bird in between that spot and the net, and then they start stealing all those points. And then they're like, and then the other person's like, crap, well that's not working. So like, okay, well what if I go from the other angle? And like they can do it, but it's a little bit harder. They have to time their arc. So they start learning about ball arcs, right? They start learning that if I jump a little bit sooner, a little bit later, it's gonna bend the curve. And the platform moves up and down, which means you can't always score. You need to know the variations of your arcs to be able to score that. But then players start blocking that, and they're like, okay, well, how else can I get to it? And like, then they discover they can kick a ball like straight up, so they knock it like from below the goal. And then there's like bank shots you can make off top, and like everything stacks on top of each other. So that's why that level is that way. But that's only going to happen if you play with a bunch of people, like many rounds with a bunch of people. Then players will start figuring that out. For other methods, like then hopefully the single player training mode is going to introduce that, so that's a thing. But for right now, we're trying to help this out a little bit. So we just released a video like an hour ago, actually, which you can check out. We are going to do highlights on all of the birds in the game to show how they play. So luckily, this isn't incorporated within the game. So like if you are the player that likes to discover things for yourself, you're not going to read the strategy guide, so you don't need to interface with this. But if you're someone who's like really into sports ball and you want to get the upper edge, you're the person who's reading Smash forums and reading about all the details of like the hacks and glitches and everything like that, you're going to go to our YouTube channel and find our bird videos. And so like we have a video right now about the hornbill that talks about how it's a carrying bird, and that it's actually one of the birds that can grab the ball and hold onto it, as opposed to many of the other birds which kick it away, which allows it to do certain techniques, but it has certain disadvantages. So hopefully through multiplayer, single player updates, and through our our social channels, there will be opportunities for everyone to learn how they want to learn the game. But yeah, it's really tough. Like it's awful when you're sitting there watching someone and they're just like, I just don't get it. Like I don't get the game. Like this game's dumb, and they play it for like 2 seconds. And you're like, crap! If only you played it for 3, you would have figured it out, right? But that's a big like design balance thing that it's a challenge every game you make.
Yeah, absolutely, and balancing how easy and how hard it is to learn mechanics, how much you're going to show, and also then you have to worry about balancing the different characters and not making them too similar, but at the same time, once they become different, they always have the potential to be overpowered or underpowered or whatnot. It seems like the prototyping this game took a day, and then everything else took, what, 6 months, 8 months?
It took us 9 months to make the game, technically 11 to ship because we had to go through like a certification process. But yeah, like 9 months of production. So yeah, we started in January this year, and we submitted the final build at the end of September. But yeah, actually, the balancing of the teams is a really interesting story. So I'm going to get into that a little bit. So I mentioned earlier, one of our goals was, hey, let's make a game that's as fun to watch as it is to play. So our game's based off of sports. And why are sports interesting to watch? Like, tons of people watch sports, and they've never held a ball in their life, right? Like, they don't actually play. Why are they engaged with this? Well, there's lots of reasons, but it's generally, one of the large reasons is because of alliance to a team. Maybe you grew up in that place. Maybe your family likes it. Maybe you moved to a new city and you love that city, right? Maybe you just like the logo or the mascot or something like that. There's something that draws you in. Well, we don't have the legacy of like a 100-year-old game. Well, we do, that's in the manual, but like not actually in real life, like in here, in this earth. We don't have the legacy of a 100-year game. So how do we get people engaged in it? Well, players are probably going to play our game. We can at least assume that much. And so when you play the game, if there's all these different birds and there's one that you really like, one that you really associate with, then you're going to root for that person. But if that's just a bird on every team, like if you could play the rooster and it's on every team, then it's like, okay, it doesn't matter. I don't care who I'm rooting for. But if rooster is part of the red hot and I play the rooster, when I watch people, I'm going to root for the red hots every time because they're my team. That's what my bird is a part of. So that is why we made the decision for each team to have its own unique birds. There's no cross above that, and that was a huge debate that I had because of mirror matching. That's how that's what kickstarted the Street Fighter II tournament scene. I was like, oh god, like if I don't allow mirror matching, will our competitive scene be destroyed? And that's still up in the air. Who knows? Like we'll have to find out as the tournaments start bringing up. But we went with that design because it would really emphasize the fact that it's as much fun to watch as it is to play by having that allegiances to teams. Mm-hmm. So all right, I'm like cool. To make someone really excited about a bird, I need to make it unique. Like it has to be completely different from all the other birds. So I was like, well, we'll just change the stats. Makes sense. Like some birds will be faster at diving, and like some birds will fly better and whatnot. So I was like, okay, that'll be fine. And so I do that. I'm making my game, and I put in all the stats. I'm like, okay, like I got the game to feel good with just one type of bird. Like we figured out, we balanced all the mechanics. We got the collision system working right. Like we're like, okay, it's good. Now let's change it up. This will be like our baseline, like our Wii U of the game, and then let's switch it all from there. And then I made 4 different types of birds, and then we started playing around with those. And then I was like, oh crap, I accidentally made a fighting game. And that was terrifying because I actually say for maybe like MMOs, I think fighting games are like one of the most complicated games you can make because there's so much detail to it, like priority and like frame numbers and hitbox sizes and like people analyze how many frames like an attack has, and like that's really important in the game. So I was like, oh god, that's way too complicated. Fortunately, Sportsball is much simpler than most fighting games. Like there's like the attack stat, like the ability to tackle someone and non-tackle is like always a constant. It doesn't change based off your state. There's no like priority of frames or anything like that. So that simplified a lot of things, but it was still like I had to balance this game. Like we have 16 different characters. We need to make sure that it's not like one of them's broken and everything else is trashed here. So I read some articles written by this game designer, David Serlin, who worked on Street Fighter II Turbo HD Remix. Sure. And he's also made a bunch of awesome board games like Puzzle Strike or Puzzle Fighter. One of those is a video game, one of those is a board game. He did the board game. And he wrote a bunch of articles, and he was writing about articles about balancing and whatnot. And there's a lot of great advice in there. If you're working on a fighting game or a competitive game, I'd highly recommend reading his articles. But the most important feedback I took was just that you need like a high-level testing group. So we had been testing Sportsball since before it was in production actually, because we had the prototype. But we would bring it to events, and we'd have many new players play the game. So we'd get lots of feedback about the introduction of the game and like ramping up, which was really good. But I would go to an event, and people would tell me, oh, this bird's broken or this bird's cheap, and it would be different between every 2 group of players because they all come in with different expectations and different levels of game experience. So I was like, okay, we need to assemble a group. So I had a couple of friends in the area that I'm living that were good enough to actually beat me on occasion. And so I assembled a group, and we call it the Squawk Squad, which is one of the members figured that out. And so what we'd do is we'd meet once a week, and we'd play the game. We actually streamed a bunch of our sessions on Twitch. And so we'd play the game for an hour, and then after we played, we would talk about it for about an hour. And at the end of that, we would talk about like what birds we liked, what birds didn't get played, why, like what was I thinking about, and we'd create a tier list at the end of every one of those sessions. And it was basically like good, okay, or like lackluster, and then crappy. And then after that event, I would take all the crappy ones and make them way better, and I would take all the boring ones and make them exciting, like some interesting aspect for it. And I would leave all the top tier ones, and we'd play again. And we just did this week after week. We did this for about like 10 weeks over the course of development, and that's how we got to where we are now. There's still some interesting aspects of the balance. For example, like when I'm playing with high-level players, we don't really see the hornbill get fielded much, but I think the hornbill is a very important bird to the game because, like, the hornbill, we just released a video on it. I think it's a great bird to get introduced to the game to because it allows you to learn a lot of the more advanced mechanics a lot simply. Like, it's very easy to do the advanced mechanics with it. It just has limiting factors, like it's not as fast and it's not as versatile, so it's hard to play in higher level game as the game speeds up. But I think the bird's important to the game because players can play that bird and get introduced to the game. So there's still going to be an unbalanced tier list, and we'll see what happens when tournaments start happening. But I don't know. At this point, I'm somewhat satisfied with the balance. I don't know. Maybe you could tell me your opinions or whatnot, but we'll see how that goes.
Well, to me, the most interesting games are. It is not about the game. It is about, like you were saying, who's playing it, how they're playing it, and to me, it's very important that everyone who plays a video game, they're going to have more fun with it if they're aware of what they're bringing to the table and not just looking at the game thinking, well, you made that character too hard to use or too easy to use. No, it's about the relationship you have with that game and with that character. Years ago, I became something of a pariah among some fighting game enthusiasts in the fighting game community because I wrote an article about how balance is a theory and tiers are not hard and solid facts. Mm-hmm. And I put a picture of Maya Angelou hugging Hairy Monster from Sesame Street on the cover, or the post, because I'm like, okay, this is going to make people angry. I know this. I don't want to, but hey, I'm a smiling Maya Angelou. I'm not trying to hurt you because I'm saying that, Akuma isn't necessarily top tier or blah, blah, blah forever. It's just I think that we can be loose in our understanding of these things, and that's, so far in my time with Sportsball, it continues to change, and my idea of who's best and who's not, it totally depends on who I'm playing and how much better I've gotten. It evolves over time, which is what gives a game like that longevity. So I think if your balance is hard and fixed and you think you've got it all figured out right away, then that's one less reason to jump back into the game and try something new. If you just decide, oh, Yin and Yang are definitely top tier and Street Fighter Arcade Edition, Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition, then you're not going to have the same urge to try to figure it out. So you've done a very good job, in my opinion, of making me feel like I haven't figured it out yet. And anybody is still potentially top tier if I just change the way that I play.
Yeah, we definitely that goes hand in hand with the whole emergent mechanics. Like, we want players to be discovering new things about the game. So hopefully, when someone brings a new technique to their friend group, even if it's not to the game in general, like, that's going to change how everyone plays, right?
It's what frustrates me. And this is partly why I'm glad that you're introducing the more detailed single-player experience, not just because I think I'll enjoy it, but in order for a game like yours to get momentum, like, no one will know how good Sportsball is until the people have already played Sportsball for a couple of hours with friends who are also playing Sportsball in a way that's not wholly, like, mean-spirited and just not experimenting at all and just want to kill the other guy, but like just the right balance of wanting to experiment and also competitively wanting to win. Until people have had that experience, they're just never going to know. Like, I almost feel like it should be called Sportsball. Don't judge this game until you've played it for 4 hours with your friends. Then you'll know if you like it or not, the game. Until you've done that, like, you're just not, you have no idea. It looks so simple on the surface. And people say this about Smash Brothers all the time. It's like, oh, it's just King of the Hill. Like, people who haven't played it, I'm like, there's a lot to it, actually.
Oh,
Punched the guy and he fell down, or I went flying and this game sucks. No, there's all this stuff to it. And thankfully, because of the franchise power of Nintendo, people end up giving Smash Brothers, and they're rooting, like we were saying before, to have separate teams. Like, I know people who are totally on Team Fire Emblem at this point. Mm-hmm. All I care about is the new Fire Emblem characters, and other people who, like, intentionally go after the Fire Emblem characters just because they hate all those pretty boy anime.
Too many swords, right?
Exactly. But that's the kind of, like, investment. Even if you're saying you hate certain characters in a game, the fact that you have feelings towards them. Yeah. I wonder, geez, will there be a way that you can make me really hate some of the birds in Sportsball? Because they're cute. They're all cute little birds. I kind of like all of them.
It happens among our group. Like there's the one bird is the cassowary. So it depends on your relationship. So I'm a rooster main. That is my bird. That is my jam. I like the rooster because it's a very technical score. It's really good at doing some of the advanced scoring techniques. And so I can score a ball at crazy angles, which some of the other birds it's much more difficult to do. But there's a bird on the Sapphire Skyheart. It's called the cassowary. The cassowary is a vicious, aggressive bird. Actually, they're based off of cassowaries in real life. I'm not sure if you're aware of cassowaries. They're these large, massive birds that have 6-inch dagger claws on their feet. If held in captivity by humans, they will kill humans because they hate them. Like, I've seen it. Like, if you go into a cage with it, they'll surround you and they'll try to eviscerate you with this dagger claw. Also, cassowaries make one of the most terrifying noises I've ever heard. It sounds like horror dubstep. It's just this grating machinery as it comes out. They're vicious birds. So the cassowary in Sportsball is a very aggressive bird. It's got this very fast dive. It does these harsh, like, intense angles, and it's like it can chase after almost any bird if it's decided I'm going to tackle you. So whenever I'm playing the rooster and there's a cassowary on field, like, I'm just getting I'm spending the game in the net. Like, it's ridiculous. So like I always build up a rivalry with the cassowary player, and like there are other birds that, like, I just can't even control. Like the Gigantoraptor, it's lauded as, like, many players love the bird. It's like it is their main. They think it's like some people think it's overpowered. I can't play that bird at all. I have no idea what I'm doing with it at all. And so yeah, like, because the birds have these personalities, I think that's going to definitely shine as the tournament scene explodes.
Sure.
Right. And so that's one of the reasons why, like, we want to, like, yeah, like, we're a fairly unknown studio. Like, it's amazing that we're getting all this support by Nintendo, but we're still unknown. Like, people see Sportsball, like, oh, what's that? Or like 2DX, like, they don't know about that we made another game, actually. So like, we're still really unknown. And so that's why we want to support Sportsball over a longer term. Not only because we want to make the game last, but because it's going to take a while for people to figure out the game. So by doing these videos, by implementing updates in the game, we're hoping to make the game last long enough. So when you hear about it in a month or 2 months or 3 months, when we keep getting that new content or new patches and whatnot, players will be like, oh, like, I heard about that game. Like, people are still playing it. Like, why are they still talking about it? And then they might get involved and they'll hear about the tournament that happened, or they'll look at this crazy skill video and like, oh, it's a game with depth. Like, it's not just a silly game with birds and balls. There's strategy and technicality to it.
Yeah, your passion for it, that's what's going to sell it, I think. This passion right here. It's something that everybody wants to be a part of. Everyone wants to be a part of something that's real, and you can tell something's real if someone feels real optimism, excitement, emotion about it. And you clearly have this for Sportsball. You just didn't put it out and think on to the next game. You're making Sportsball a big part of your life for the foreseeable future, it sounds like.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, I love making games. That's what I do. But making a game takes a long time. Like, we actually try to make games very quickly. Like, shipping a game in 9 months or 11 months or whatever is, like, on a console, our first console release, that's kind of quick. But still, like, that's a year of my life. Like, if I did that every year, I could only make, like, I don't know, like 60 more games. Like, I get a lot of ideas. I have tons of ideas for games. Like, if I'm going to make a game, I need to make sure that it's good. It's something that I can fall in love with. Because if I can't fall in love with it, how am I going to expect anyone else to be worth their time, right? Like, I'm developing it. I'm living my life off of it. So it's got to be something I'm very passionate about. Like, I love Sportsball, but there are other ideas that I'm, like, even more excited about.
Really?
But Sportsball is the other half of 2DX, Ned. It's his, like, favorite game, like, just flat out. And, like, some people, like, I've even had designers come and tell me they're like you're high off your own supply, like, you're too into your own game. And, like, screw that, I don't care. Like if I can't be passionate about what it is I'm working on, why am I working on it? I could go work a desk job making, like, 4 or 5 times as much money if I want to work on something I'm not passionate about. Screw that. Like, I'm an independent developer. I made a choice to do this, right? So I'm going to work on something I love. And I've made enough experiences and played enough games that are, like, niche that if you love it, there's going to be other people that love it as well. You just need to find those people.
Mm-hmm. And continue to express your love of the thing you made by supporting it the way that you plan to. Was it you or Ned? Did you have a long-standing love of sports and or birds? I'm almost getting the feeling. I don't know. You probably know the story of the guy who created Pokemon. He had 2 great loves. Neither of them were school. He apparently got terrible grades, even though he's a smart guy. He loves Space Invaders and bug collecting. And he was like, how can I make video games and being out in nature by myself, just categorizing and discovering different insects, my life? And he's pulled it off. Do you have like a huge passion for basketball and ostriches?
My passion for basketball and ostriches has increased since sports ball. It wasn't that specifically, but a number of factors did play into it. I'd say the two largest things are one, like my passion for the game Joust. Like I said, that's probably my second favorite game of all time. Like before 2DX was a company, me and Ned, we would there was an arcade in New Hampshire where we grew up, and it's like one of these famous arcades because a bunch of high scores are set there. They have a Joust cabinet there, and we would just play that game forever. We would just 2-player going in there co-op trying to get the highest scores, and I just love that game. Its mechanics are so brilliantly designed. It's so elegant, and I'm surprised that no one's touched the mechanics in 30 years. So I was glad to be able to do that. But the other aspect and why I can really get behind Sportsball is that Sportsball is a game that can help enable you make friends. When I was growing up, and I was some dweeb in middle school, I didn't know how to talk to people. I didn't know how to be social. What is that, right? So the people I ended up making friends with, I made friends with them because we played games together. We didn't know how to communicate. We didn't know how to express our interests or desires. But if you play a game with someone else, there's a baseline of rules. It's okay, these are the rules that we've agreed upon to interact. And that actually gives you basically a stepping off point to actually start a relationship with someone, to actually socially engage with them. Mm-hmm. So I think games are very powerful because they can do that. They can set a lowest common denominator for you to be able to interact with another human being. And because of that, it becomes easy for people who even don't have any social skills at all to make friends. Mm-hmm. So Sportsball is a game that does that. It gets a whole bunch of people. It doesn't matter how many. You can have 20 people in a room. They can all watch Sportsball and play it. And so whether you're becoming rivals with this one person that you've been fighting all night, or whether you're just in the back announcing and heckling the players, maybe there's someone else doing that, right? You can make friends through Sportsball. So that is sort of the passion aspect of why I think the game is valuable and why it's worth it to spend our time developing it and why it's worth it for other people to play it.
Absolutely. It comes to mind this idea that I've had for a while, but you've, in speaking, now I have a concrete way of expressing this idea, so thank you. I feel as though there's two great social lubricants in our world.
Yeah. Things
that are drugs, and I'm not advocating. Don't do them, kids. They're bad for you. They're bad for your health. Alcohol being one. It destroys a concept of social structure because you're no longer conscious of it, and you just do whatever you want. You're not worried about breaking the rules, or if you don't have social skills because you're drunk and, hey, come here, I like you. So those barriers are broken down. The fear gets erased because there's no structure at all anymore because you can't even conceptualize one. Video games being the other great social lubricant because they create a structure that, like you said, everyone can agree upon, and it frees you from having to worry about, am I following the rules of this conversation right? Do they like that kind of joke? Did I make the right facial expression? There's so much nuance in a social engagement. It's a lot of work for a lot of people, just about everybody, to be like, am I doing this right? You can't help but be worried about it. Games take that away. You're all involved in the same structure together. You're all communicating with the same language. Simplifies things and lets you off the hook, and you can play around in that structure as you like. One of the few women who told me she was in love with me would only tell me while she was playing Animal Crossing.
It just enabled this.
Yeah. I'd be like, do you like me? She's like, I don't know what that means. Like is so subjective. What is that exactly? What do you mean by that? And then playing Animal Crossing on the GameCube. Yeah, I love you. Thank you, Animal Crossing. It's a story.
A lot of Animal Crossing together.
She actually kept that GameCube. It was this GameCube that was broken in such a way that it would overheat unless it played Animal Crossing. That was the only game. Yeah, I missed that GameCube. I played GameCube for a while because Animal Crossing, the GameCube one, the data is so small, it actually loads almost instantaneously.
Yeah,
it's just all on board at that point. So it's the only. She has the GameCube that only plays Animal Crossing still. She's a pretty cool person. Hope she's doing well out there anyway. I want to know more about you as a human being, Austin. You talked a little bit about middle school. Was that around the time that you decided you wanted to be a game developer? Was it something that's been in you for a while?
Probably. Actually, I want to hit back on a topic that you just talked about. This is also a personal story. Actually, two things. So on the alcohol side, so I find this interesting because I don't drink. It's just not my style. But I had an experience as to why alcohol can be useful for certain people at certain times. And so I was working with a bunch of developers in the Philippines at my last job. And a lot of these guys were like, they're like really, really reserved. Like they would talk a little bit, but like one of the things is they'd always say "sir" to me, and like that just felt like the weirdest thing ever. Like it made me really uncomfortable. But even the ones that I was more familiar with, like some of the guys that I've been working with for like a while, they didn't really open up much. Like I didn't learn about them. And then the last night I was there, they invited me to go out to a bar with them. And so, you know, I'm just sipping back my Cokes and everything, but they're having a couple of drinks. And by the end of the night, they were all acting like me, that they were all boisterous. They were all like just willing to talk about anything. And then it sort of clicked for me. It's like, oh, I understand why you drink. It lets you be like I am all the time. I don't have as much inhibitions as some people.
Sure.
So, but yeah, alcohol is also very dangerous. But that was something that broadened my horizons a little bit.
Oh, absolutely. To be naturally drunk without any of the downsides of drinking, like being slower, being less coordinated, maybe being less sensitive, physically and otherwise. To be naturally drunk is like the best way to live. I try to live that way as much as I can, and hopefully I'll keep getting better at it. And good on you for feeling as though you can have that kind of disinhibition all the time. Yeah,
I mean, it can sometimes be a bad thing, but yeah, most of the time it's all right.
Well, it speaks to the idea any independent video game developer, there has to be some level of, we're just going to go for it. Like, you can't be someone who's like, well, according to the numbers, we don't have much of a chance, so let's not bother it. You have to have some level of freedom of fear holding you back in order to take the kind of risks you'd have to in order to put as much time and energy and risk-taking into making a game in general. So it kind of adds up that you would have that.
So anyway, now I'll get back to your question.
Sure.
Sorry for the segue. I've wanted to make games for a very long time. I think I don't remember when I first like actively deciding like, okay, games are going to be a thing I did, but like, I don't know, I was like, okay, I need to think of colleges. Okay, I'll go to some college where I can make games. I'm like, how do games get made? I guess there's like programming involved. I'll go to some college for programming. Like, that was my plan. I was like, I'll go to MIT because MIT is a college that I've heard of, right? That's not what happened at all. Actually, an interesting moment was I was like halfway through high school, and like I'm already set, you know. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go make video games. It's cool. And then one day it dawned on me, like, I've never made a video game before. What if I don't like it? What if I hate it? What if I go through 4 years of college and then get a job and I'm like, oh God, I don't like video games. What did I do all this time? And I was like, crap. And I had like this huge crisis. I was like, oh my God, like I don't know what I'm gonna do anymore. I don't know what I like. So I decided, I was like, okay, you know what? Let's throw that idea away. Let's just ignore the fact that we're gonna make video games and let's see what happens. And so I started paying attention to all the things I like doing. And I was like, oh, like I like working with computers, right? Like I was always like grabbing spare parts from any computer I could find to just sort of like, you know, add a little bit more memory or a little bit more hard drive space to the crappy like Pentium machine that I had. So that was really fun. I like downloading things and playing with tools and whatnot. I like drawing a lot. Like I sketched up a whole bunch of terrible DBZ fan art in middle school and high school and whatnot. So like I would just draw a whole bunch. I like playing music. Like I had this little piano and I'd like learn like video game themes and whatnot. And so like that was really cool. And I would play a lot of like role playing games with my friends, and I like to be the dungeon master. So I would like, you know, build up worlds, and I would like build specific encounters. So like the players would come within an inch of their life, but just barely survive. And so there was like, okay, I like doing all these things, like, but I can't just pick one. Like, I don't like any of them like far more than the others. I was like, okay, well, if I can't pick one, what's something that incorporates all of these things? And that happens to be video games. Video games, you can do it all. So I was able to come back to the same conclusion. And I ended up going to a college for video game design, actually. It's Champlain College in Burlington, Vermont. They have a degree program where you can get a bachelor's in game development. And they have 3 different tracks: art, programming, and design. So I decided I was going to go in for design. And I went to that college because 2 of my high school friends were like, oh, we heard about this college, let's go there. Originally, I was set on going to Full Sail because I was like, oh, I can get my degree in 18 months, and then boom, I'll be in the industry like before I'm 20. Awesome. I've met some people from Full Sail, and they're very accomplished programmers, but I don't think it gives as broad of a perspective of game development. So I'm glad I didn't go there because of the experiences I had at Champlain. But yeah, so I got my bachelor's in video game design. But even during college, like I had like another crisis because like I was the design work that you do is often like writing documentation and communicating with teams. So like you'll spend a lot of time like, okay, I want a game to work like this. So I'll type up, this is how the mechanics work, and this is what the UI will look like. And like you just write down all your thoughts. And that's lame. That's not a game. That's a document describing a game. Like I could sit down and just talk to you and it'd be the same experience. No, I want to make games. So during college, I started picking up like learning like game tools. Like I learned like multimedia fusion because there's this game developer, Cognac, who used multimedia fusion to make Noid of Love 2. And I'm like, that's really cool. Like that's an IGF nominee. I can use that, and I could be there one day, right? Like I started picking up some like programming languages, and I started just making games. By the time I graduated college, I had built like 9 or 10 games already.
Wow.
I mean, they're tiny, crappy, like amateur projects, but like still, like I had finished games, and like that was cool, right? But anyway, so I didn't actually go into games right after graduating. It was quite a while before I actually got into the game industry. The first job that I had was a really crazy job. I was an intern for Disney Imagineering. So I didn't know what the term Imagineer was at the time because I grew up in New Hampshire, which is like on the opposite world from Disney. Apparently, if you talk to someone from LA, Imagineers are like huge deals or like celebrities or something like that. I don't know. They like build Disney rides, whatever. But yeah, I won't go into too much detail. We'll fast forward.
No. Because I can't help but wonder. Oh, years ago, Warren Spector and Disney tried to get me to like Epic Mickey, and I kind of liked it. I think I gave it like a 7 or something, but they were really hoping it would be a 10 out of 10. And Warren Spector was touring video game press people around Disneyland and saying like, this is game design, guys. This is like you're starting here, and we're going to pace your experience through this and allow you to interact to a degree. There's also scripted moments, in Pirates of the Caribbean ride and whatnot. So it's meshing together environment design and interactivity and storytelling into one thing. So this is why I wanted to make video games, because I wanted to make Disneyland in a game. And they sort of let him do that. Epic Mickey has some stuff like that, but not a ton. But did being at Disney make you think about game design too? And it's okay if it didn't, but
no, it did. I worked on some weird stuff there, but one of the things that I picked up from working at Disney was this concept of like the Disney magic. Like, so they make all these amazing, awesome experiences, and they're able to do that because they understand their limitations. Like, they don't need to, like, say you go on the Peter Pan ride, right? Like, they don't need to actually put you in a flying ship, like, high above a city. They need to make you believe that you're in a flying ship high above a city. So, like, if you were to look at that ride, like, when the lights are on and everything like that, it's just, like, a couple painted buildings. It's, like, 10 feet off the, like, 5 or 10 feet off the ground. Like, it's really simple. But when you're there, you feel like you're right with Peter Pan, right? They do all these tiny little details that are just enough in just the right place that convince you of the experience. And so that idea of, like, you don't have to do the whole thing. You have to do the important things. Like, another example, another analogy is when you're painting something. So when you paint like a portrait or something, you'll look at it and you'll go like, oh my good lord, like if it's really well done, like it looks like a beautiful rendered piece, like it's like perfect, like it looks like a photograph. But generally, if you look at that painting, look at the edges, you'll see like huge brush strokes because that's not what you're paying attention to. That's not the focus. An experienced painter knows where your eye's going to go and gives you the information you need there. And that's what Disney does. And that has taught me a lot of things about game development. That's why, like, when we build a game, we focus on the important parts. We focus on the aspects of, like, this is the part that you're going to notice. This is the part you're going to see. So that's the one we need to focus on, right? For example, like in Sportsball, lances go flying everywhere. When you tackle someone, a lance will go flying and it'll stick into like a platform or a ceiling or a wall or something like that. There's actually a limit to how many lances are on screen at one time because, we can only show so many. Like if we just showed infinite amounts, the game would crash, right? Because there's limitations to technology. So I picked a number that you never notice that a lance disappears. No one's ever mentioned it to me. I mean, now that I'm saying this now, they're gonna load up Sportsball like, I figured out this is how many lances are on the screen. But like, for most people, like that's enough. And it's knowing about those little details because, once again, games take a really long time to make. And so you need to make sure that you spend your time wisely. Otherwise, you're gonna have an unfinished mess when it comes out. A problem that some people have these days. So knowing that what is just enough to sell a person on the experience, to have them step into the magic circle and believe the game world that they're in right now. That was something that I picked up from Disney, which has been insanely valuable.
Makes a lot of sense. The things that other people don't notice are sometimes what makes the experience worthwhile. That's
Yeah.
going to be tough. That's another thing about game design that always makes me kind of sad, is that so many people, of course, they can't help but think they know why they like a thing. And they will look at parts that they then associate with the good time that they had. Like, oh, I like such and such game because I like the characters. But then they play a game with the exact same characters and find out they're not having any fun at all because so many of these things they weren't conscious of were different. Some people can't stand the new Assassin's Creed game. Some people like it. It seems like Assassin's Creed on the surface, but then beneath that, there's a lot of little things that are different. Some say worse, so they're not having as much fun. To know that your audience isn't always going to know why they like the thing that you did and not appreciate all of the little stuff you put in there, is that ever... Like, are you just hoping that there are other people that are really interested in how the sausage is made, and then they find out, and then are okay with the fact that maybe the majority won't? How does that make you feel?
Well, it's like there's a saying, right? Like, what is it? Good design is noticed, but great design is invisible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of the idea of like, if you're doing your job right, no one's going to point it out. Like, no one points out when sounds like, very rarely do people point out when like the sound design is really great.
Mm-hmm.
Because when it's really great, it works. It makes sense.
Yeah.
It makes the entire experience better. So they'll say like, oh, this is like a really great film, or a really great game. But like, it's all those little components that make it that. So it's okay if no one notices it, because their feedback and their experience with the game will shine through.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need to notice like those little tiny details, because they are noticing it. They're just not cognizant of it.
Sure.
But every so often, yeah, you'll get someone who's really into the game, and they'll be like, wow, like, I mean, I can't think of an example right now, but like they'll point out some little specific deal. Actually, like, some of the people have taken the time to read our e-manual in our game. Our e-manual might be one of the longest e-manuals in all of Wii U video games. It's 30 pages long. Most are like 1 or 2. And so we put in like the history of Sportsball. We put in like details on the different birds and the teams and whatnot. And so like most people, they'll never see that. They'll be like, wow, this is some weird, silly, futuristic game. But like the reason why a lot of the elements are cohesive, why the maps make sense with the UI, and why the music makes sense with the characters, and why the names all work together, is because we built a world. Like there is a history to Sportsball. It started this time. It was influenced by these people. These were the key star players, and like all those things that aren't upfront get bleeded into the game, and so you feel it even if you can't point to it. So no, like I'm cool with like if no one notices little details, it's not a big deal. Like when someone does, when one person out of like 10,000 notices it, yeah, I appreciate that. But you're gonna get the understanding that like if they like the whole game experience, of like, wow, this is just a really cool game, then they're getting it. Like if the game didn't have those things, they wouldn't like it as much.
Right.
That's just something you understand as you design games, right?
Yeah. I'd imagine. And before I forget, because I want to hear about how you went from Disney to then maybe other studios, and 2DX has another game. We should definitely talk about what that is. But before I would hate for us to run out of time.
Yeah, we're
We
getting
only
close.
have like 15 minutes left. This has been a great episode. You've really carried it very well. Who sang the Sportsball theme? Because that song is awesome. What happened? How did that happen?
Oh man, I'm so glad about that. So I've been working. So one of my friends from middle school is now an established artist. His name's Nickelpunk. He's a local artist here in Seattle. And you can go check out his music right now. If you go to nickelpunk.bandcamp.com, or you search Nickelpunk on SoundCloud, you can listen to a bunch of music. It's all freaking fantastic. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. So I've been working with him to do music for the games that I make for a little while. So I really wanted him to do Sportsball, and he was making some track. Like our influences were like the 80s, like Asia and Flock of Seagulls and bands like that. But it's set in the far future, so it's like the best moments of the 80s, like our nostalgia of the 80s, which is way better than it actually was. And this whole rock anthem theme. So he started writing some stuff, and then there was one track that he wrote that had this whispering in it. Like it was just like a bass line. It was just a bass thumbing up and down. And it said, "Live by the bird, die by the bird." And it just kept whispering that. And I lost it. Oh my good Lord. That was the coolest thing ever. And I was like, okay, we need lyrics in this game. I want them to be singing. And so he wrote up some lyrics for the title screen for the second theme that he did for the song. And I was like, birds will fly, hearts will soar. Holy crap. It blew my mind. And so we had to put that in the title screen. So to this day, when I load up like Sportsball and I hit new match, and the first thing that happens, you hear that crash symbol and birds will fly. Like it's just, I'm ready for Sportsball now. It sets me in the mood. I'm glad that people are really responding to that. Like I was like, oh, people probably think this is like cheesy and dumb, but like this is Sportsball. This is what I'm excited about. No, people seem to like it actually.
Yeah, as they should. It's such a So how I have received Sportsball as a concept, we've talked a lot about the design and the mechanics, and those are all, the depth of it. But just, before you open up the pizza box of Sportsball, when you're just looking at the box and judging what kind of pizza you're going to get from the cover, it is such an interesting, like I'm still puzzling over it actually, and I don't know if you fully understand what's inspired you to do what you've done, because Sportsball as a term is like something people who don't like sports often use to make fun of sports. Like, oh crap, they're talking about the sports ball on Twitter again. Guess I'll get off Twitter until they start talking about Game of Thrones or whatever. So it's like a sarcastic term of like, sports are dumb, sports ball, why do people care about it? But it's in fact really passionate about sports ball. Like you're joking and serious at the same time, like sincerely loving the concept of sports. Mm-hmm. And aware that it's kind of ridiculous that one would sing passionately about birds would fly. Like, it's funny and awesome? Is that what you were going for?
Well, I mean, the reason why we decided to adopt the name Sportsball was a couple of reasons. But the main thing is that, this game's ridiculous. You're flying these massive birds, like, with lances, and, like, you got these crazy helmets and whatnot, and, like, balls are flying everywhere, there's a field net and whatnot. So, like, it fit with the term Sportsball because Sportsball is a term to use to reference like a ridiculous game. And actually, like, the meme's really old. It's from like '95 or something like that. So I wanted to like sort of make use of that meme. But there was a specific video that I watched. There's a music video for a Justice song called New Lands. And like if you watch that video, you'll understand almost all the influences of Sportsball.
Really?
And yeah, I highly recommend checking it. It's a great video, good song too. And when they play this game that involves like someone batting from like a machine-fired ball that gets sent to like a roller derby ring where people are using lacrosse sticks to beat each other and gets thrown into like a football arena where people are running the ball. And like when I saw that, I was like, that's Sportsball. That's what Sportsball is right there. And then I was like, okay, so Sportsball is a ridiculous game that combines many different crazy elements. So our game does that. Like the game is to be taken lightly. Like it's a joke. It's hilarious. It's cheesy. And so that's why I thought the term fit for it.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. It's like if Over the Top was awesome. I don't know if you know the Sylvester Stallone movie Over the Top. Like if it was
that's a movie? Oh no, I'm unaware of it.
Oh, it's a heck of a movie. Yeah, it's both self-parody and legitimately awesome sometimes. Mm-hmm. But it's like if it was even more legitimately awesome. Like if you like watching men grunt and be upset and sweat and push on each other because it's an arm wrestling movie.
Wow. I need to see that.
You ought to watch it. But it's also like a father reuniting with his son drama. So
okay.
It's like half Webster, half Rocky, but with arm wrestling. Anyway, this idea is totally lost any sort of meaning as it relates to Sportsball. But they kind of make me feel the same way, except Sportsball is legit good. And Over the Top is like accidentally good. Anyway, Daniel Graham asks, we have a few questions.
All right.
Maybe I'll have time I wanted to ask you about the visuals of Sportsball because it seemed like a deliberate decision to not make it look retro like Joust. Like it looks like, clean HD 2D art, but it's not. So hopefully we'll get to that stuff.
All right, we'll see.
Daniel Graham asks, what are some local multiplayer games besides Smash and Joust that you're into? Not necessarily games that influence Sportsball, but just stuff you like. Do you like, you said before, playing games with friends is something you really enjoy. There are other games you like playing with them.
Yeah.
You mentioned Towerfall and you mentioned Sports Friends, but even outside of that.
Well, Samurai Gun's my jam. Like that is the game that I will always go to. Like I love Towerfall. Towerfall is an amazingly designed game, but in the big three of local multiplayer right now, which is Towerfall, Samurai Gun, and Nidhogg, Samurai Gun is my top. It's so clean. It's so minimal. It's everything is completely deliberate in that game, and I love how precise it is. And like, just like there's also these little details that really like change the whole experience. Like for example, you can switch the direction of your blade. You can do that by holding the slash button. Most people don't know about that, and it does almost nothing. It changes your collision arc very slightly, which can cause you to get kills that you wouldn't normally because players aren't expecting it. And like it's tiny little things about that and how precise it is that why I love Samurai Gun. Another game that I really love is Lethal League, and it's actually out now. I played the prototype, which is just available like on a Flash website, which you should totally play. It's this game where it's a competitive game where you're knocking a baseball to each other with a baseball bat, and every time you're trying to hit the opponent with the ball, but every time you do it, it doubles the speed, and it gets ridiculous, like DBZ level fast. They released a full game, and I haven't spent a ton of time with it, but it's got full 4-player online play. Like that game's like totally legit. So Samurai Gun and Lethal League are my jams right now. I'm looking forward to Gang Beasts. I hope it becomes more than what it is right now. It's very silly and very fun. And also Push Me Pull You is super great, which is it's hard to find. You can pretty much only play it in like Australia and like events and whatnot. But that's a weird game. We got these two people connected to each other like a gross snake, and it makes all the worst sounds, and I love it. Yeah, those are some games to check out.
Competitive Nobi Boy kind of is how.
Absolutely. And
Gang Beasts is the one that's polygon based, right? And you're like wrestling or rubbing each other, kind of.
Yeah, it's the characters interact in such a real way. It's like real fighting. It's like what actual real fighting when people don't know how to fight is. It's.
Samurai Gun, Bo Blythe, who created that, was on the show forever ago, back when he was talking about LA Death Disc, which was a game he made for the LA Game Space. I don't know if you know Bo. I think you two would get along.
I met him at IndieCade finally. He's really cool. I mean, like I love his work. I played Zero Space. I played Dasu Relief, and like it was cool getting to meet him. And I would like to talk with him more. I'm super down. I'm super excited about Hyper Light Drifter. So getting to play that beta and talk to him about it was super cool.
He's on that too. That's really, I'm so happy for Bo. Samurai Gun doesn't, there is another one. They got a lot of beef for not having single player, but I know he had a lot of really exciting ideas about single player. I don't know.
I like their single player mode. Like the survival mode's great. You can play that co-op. I try to beat it. Like I really like it. So
yeah. Huh, awesome. One more questions for me that I wanted to know. How did you get from Disney to 2DX? Did you work on other games too? Talk about 2DX's other game. How did that process happen?
I'll tell the super abbreviated version of that. So after Disney, I was like, I'm not making games. I want to go make games. I'll go make games in my own time. So I worked some crappy tech job in Massachusetts where I was trying to make games at night. And I was doing that, but it wasn't really working out. And I was like, okay, I'm going to volunteer at GDC. And they're like, you can't take the time off. I'm like, all right, screw this. So I quit that job, and I went and volunteered at GDC. And I was like, okay, I'm going to be indie. I can totally do this. I've got a month, and I can pay for this month's rent, so I need to pay for next month's rent. I'll make a game. So I made a game, and I did that in a month, and it made enough money to pay next month's rent. And I was like, that's not sustainable.
What game was that?
That game's called Bosses Forever, the original Bosses Forever, just Bosses Forever. You can play it on Congregate. Yeah, so that wasn't really sustainable. So I was like, okay, if I'm like, and I was also sort of compromising at the time. So I was like, if I'm going to compromise, I might as well be making games or making more money doing it. That's when I got my first game industry job. I was a junior designer at a company called Tagged, which is the largest social network you've probably never heard of. And yeah, but we were making games that were actually trying to make people become friends. So I really loved their vision, and it was awesome working there. But I work in the game industry, and so after a while, I got laid off along with the whole games team. Because that happens, right? And it wasn't a big deal. It's actually, that's a really great story. I wish I had time to tell that.
No. We'll make time. It's okay. We've got 7 minutes. We can eat up 10 if we have to. What's the story, please?
Okay, I'll tell the story of the best layoff ever. So we knew it was coming. We got an email. Everyone on the games production team got an email a day before about a 15-minute meeting that a bunch of us were invited to the next day in the middle of the day. And one of my buddies was like, hey, like, what do you think this meeting's about? And I'm like, I don't know, it's probably just some meeting. And then I send her a message. I'm like, dust off your resume. We're probably all getting fired tomorrow. But so we all come in the next day, and we know what's going on. So we're not even working. Like, it's not gonna matter in a day, right? So we're all just hanging out, telling about like, okay, what are your plans? Where you're gonna be going? Like, I was up till 3 a.m. like working on like some applications and like working on this prototype for another company because I was like, okay, I have to like get a job, right? I had to figure out with my roommate how much time we have left to like pay our rent and everything. But the next day happens, and like, our boss, like the head of our division, this amazing guy who works at the Social Game Network right now, Andrew Peterson, like he was really overwhelmed about like having to let us go. Like, it was touching. Like, he talked to us and like basically like they liked the work that we were doing. We were actually the most productive team at the company, but we weren't making money, so we couldn't pay for ourselves. So like, yeah, we had to be laid off. And like the CEO came in, he's like, yeah, like this is a bummer, but like they gave us severance packages, and like holy crap, like I had money, and like so it was really awesome. Like they were super nice to us, and they were bummed out about it, but like it was just the way it had to go. And so as we were all leaving, we were supposed to pack up our stuff and leave before the rest of the team got there, because they were brought down to a meeting where they were all being given the information that this team is being let go. But we had agreed, like, oh, we're going to go to the bar down the street, like Grumpy's, in San Francisco. Like, we're going to just, hang out and talk about things and, like, tell old stories and whatnot. And, well, the people from the rest of the company came up before we left, and, like, some of my friends came in tears. They're like, oh, my God, like, I'm so sad for you. And I was like, I was blown away. Like, I didn't know that we were that good of friends. And, like, some of the people were like, oh, you're going to Grumpy's? Like, we're going to go with you. Like, we're going to talk stuff. And literally within like 15 minutes, the entire company was down in that bar. The CEO was handing out Jello shots. The whole thing was on the company, and they just turned it into a party, because it was like a farewell party. And like, man, like I've heard some layoff stories. They're normally brutal. They're normally devastating. Like, I got lucky. That was a good day. That was just a great day.
Yeah, they actually cared about you as a human being and each other. And the business side of it, you can't control that, but they did as much Jello shots as they could to try to. They really cared. It's pretty awesome.
So that was really cool. So I had a good experience at my first game development job. The second one, I ended up becoming a programmer. So at first I was a designer, and then the second job I was a programmer. I worked on mobile games. We actually released a game. It was called it's called Crystal Casters. It's for the iOS and Android. It's a Puzzle and Dragons clone. I like it. It's pretty beautiful. I didn't have enough time to fix some of the issues with it, so it doesn't run as well as I'd like it to. But anyway, that was super fun. But I got inspired to start a company while I was working there, and I was like, okay, I need to save up enough money to go independent, because I've done this before. I know what it takes, right? At least to a certain degree. So I started up saving up half my paycheck, and I did that for a year. And at the end of the year, which was last December, I left that company and then moved up to Seattle. Bellevue, actually, next to Seattle, and we've been running full-time since. There's a whole bunch more details into how that whole thing started, but maybe I'll write about it someday, because that's like another hour conversation.
Sure. And that was 2DX. That was how 2DX was formed. And you have another game out. What's the other game?
So the first game we released, which was the game that we released at the end of last year, is Bosses Forever 2.0. So we took my original indie title, and we basically souped it up to more of the experience I wanted it to be. And that game's actually, you can play it right now. You can download it Windows, PC, Mac, browser, or Ouya. Yeah, an Ouya game, right? Weird.
Cool.
And it's free, so you can just play it. It's a game where you and your bestest buddy play off in a bro-op mode against this boss who learns based on how you fight. So it constantly adapts to your strategies, and it tries to learn how to beat specifically you. So it's like a roguelike. Before that was like really an interesting genre, a couple years ago. And like you just fight it. It's Mega Man style, fighting a boss in this endless tower, trying to like get the highest score you can.
Sounds amiibo-ish too. I have a couple. I don't know if you've gone amiibo crazy.
I don't have one yet, but
it turned out pretty good, I think. It's actually like legit. The Link one is like ashamed. Like even when you hold him up straight, his head is down because he doesn't want to see. He's cross-eyed actually. So don't get the Link one unless you want the Skinner item from Hyrule Warriors. But yes, it sounds as though the game, because the amiibo is neat, it makes Smash Brothers like it gives it a personality, and it gets to know the way you play and change the way it plays based on how you play. It sounds like you figured that algorithm out a while ago. That's not an easy thing to do. Congratulations.
Yeah, I won't go into the details, but I will admit that the Disney magic has a big play on that system.
Really? Yeah. Interesting. Any chance it would come to other things someday?
That would be cool, but I don't think we don't have plans to. But we have joked about what we call it Bosses for You 2, Bro, which would be the Wii version of it, where you got like 4 players and like one player can play as the boss on like the tablet screen and whatnot. Like it would be super cool. But yeah, I'd have to port the whole game over to Unity. It'd be a big investment in time, and there are more exciting games to make than that one. So we probably won't get around to it, but we like to talk about it.
Well, yeah, and maybe someone. You never know what'll happen. You could be at GDC. Somebody could say, "I'll make that." You'll only make like 20%, but I'll do like literally all the work and blah blah blah. You never know what could happen.
Yeah,
that would be fun. Yeah. There was that rumor Smash Brothers would have a mode where you could control the boss with the gamepad. Seemed like such a great idea. It didn't happen, I guess. So yes, I don't know if we got to the art about Sportsball. Is there a reason why you chose that specific art style?
Yeah, like, I mean, the first game that released, Bosses Forever 2.0, was a pixel art game, like, very specifically so. And, like, that made a huge split of our audience. Some people are like, oh my god, I love the aesthetic. Other people are like, this is trash. Why are people doing this these days? Why aren't all graphics AAA 3D, right? So I don't, like, we want to make lots of games, and I didn't want to establish us as a studio that just makes pixel art games. Mm-hmm. So although, like, Sportsball could have been a pixel art game, like, I wanted it to feel... Like I wanted it to feel like more intense than that, more realized, right? Like more have a more accessible visual style. And as we sort of focused on that, as I got better at painting, as I was able to like make the UI and whatnot, we were really able to nail the style of like this is a game that is set in the future. It's bright, it's colorful, it is 80s in the year 2180. So it was to really sell the aesthetic of the game, that it's this over-the-top, ridiculous neon, like, ball fest. We wanted to bring the level to beyond pixel art. So I'm glad we were able to do that. Like, I love pixel art. When pixel art's done great, it's beautiful. Like, Fez is gorgeous, super time-forcing, animations are mind-blowing. But not every indie game has to be pixel art. In fact, the game that you're making, the visual style should support the game that it is. And Sportsball is best not to be a pixel art game. I'm glad that it's the style that it is. I think it sells the idea better.
Yeah. Because, like you said, when people, or a lot of people anyway, when they see pixel art, sadly they think of the past. Like I think that's a little regrettable because there's more pixel art games being made now than I think in the 80s because there's just more games being made now. And that it's not something everybody can do, but if you can get it down, you can pull off pixel art a lot faster than you would be able to like all hand-drawn art.
Oh yeah, it's much easier to produce, like just flat out.
But only if you aren't bad at it. Like it's a particular, it's kind of like rapping. Like a good rapper, they're not going to have to do as much practicing as someone who's both emoting with tone and with cadence. It's just cadence, but if you're really good at it, great. Whereas a terrible rapper is very, very painful, maybe more painful.
It's something to focus on.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I think that's about it for time. Austin, thanks so much for being on the show.
Ooh, this is super cool.
Yeah, you did a fantastic job. Sportsball is on the Wii U eShop right now.
Yes.
If you are playing Smash Brothers on there, like I have been, you owe it to yourself to. It's almost like an extra mode in Smash Brothers. It's so much the spirit of Smash Brothers, without following the exact same design elements. But the feeling of I don't know everything that's going on and why it's happening, but I feel like I could understand it someday if I just dig in a little bit further. That feeling is one that's maintained throughout Sportsball for the time I've played it, which has been about a month now, I think. It's been out for a little bit. Hopefully people will check it out. They can follow you on Twitter. You've got the 2DX account and your account. Is that right?
Yeah, so you can follow our company. If you want to know the latest on like what we're working on and our updates, like the official stuff, our contests, follow at TOO_DX. And that's actually, I want to plug this for a moment. We're doing weekly contests right now for our single player, for our rally ball game mode. Okay. So if $10 is a steep price tag for you to buy Sportsball, you can actually earn that money back. Every week we're going through all the stadiums and we're going to hold a contest. The person who gets the highest score in rally ball gets a $10 eShop gift card. That ends at midnight every Sunday, which means this week is the South Africa International Space Station. So if you can get the best amount of waves like tonight and post that to our Twitter feed, you'll get yourself your Sportsball copy paid or another great eShop title.
Wow.
So yeah, that's follow at TOO_DX for all that details. If you want to feel the musings of a ridiculous game developer and more personal stuff, you can follow me at PIIDX. And I'm totally down to telling all the things we didn't get to. If you want to talk about game development or like Smash Brothers or French fries or EDM, like I talk about that stuff. That's all cool.
That sounds great. As for me, I'm at TronNauts on Twitter. You can watch this show later on YouTube, youtube.com/SubHolmesShow. You can listen to it later on Libsyn and iTunes. It's the fastest I've ever managed to do that. End of show plugging. Chief Austin, thanks again. Hopefully we'll be in touch.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
All right.